Welcome in this video. I am Dr. Vinita Bhadoria, Associate Professor of English, Government College, Behror. This video is useful for the BA second year students. It belongs to paper first, Poetry and Drama. In this video, I am going to discuss the poem A River, written by A.K. Ramanujan. In the previous videos, I have discussed a brief introduction of A.K. Ramanujan and one of his poem Obituary. A brief introduction of the poem A River. A River is one of the finest poems of Ramanujan, appeared in the collection of the poems named The Striders, published in 1966. This poem is about the Veki River which flows through the city of Madurai. Madurai is a city of South India known for its temples, Tamil culture, and its great ancient poets also. The poet clearly reveals the attitudes of both old and new Tamil poets who have shown utter indifference and callousness to human suffering at the time of devastating food. The poem is an evocation of a river, and as an evocation, it succeeds admirably. The imagery in the poem is suggestive and picturesque. The dryness of the river suggests the emotional sterility and want of human concern of the poets. Ramanujan also uses a variety of poetic techniques such as alliteration, assonance, consonance, and enjambment to unify the text. Alliteration occurs when words are used in succession or at least appear close together and begin with the same letter. Assonance and consonance are other forms of repetition in which a vowel or a consonant sound is used multiple times in words that close in proximity. A few of these are noted with the body of the text. Enjambment is another important technique. This occurs when a line is cut off before its natural stopping point. It forces a reader down to the next line and the next quickly. One is forced to move forward in order to comfortably resolve a phrase or a sentence. A great example is between lines 4 and 5, in which a reader has to move down a line to find out what summer brings. All of these techniques contribute to the speaker's tone. It fluctuates back and forth between disappointment, analytical, and even light-hearted at times. I will recite you the poem and then I'll explain it. In Madurai. Madurai is a South Indian city, city of temples and poets who sang of cities and temples. Every summer, a river dries to a trickle in the sand, bearing the sand drips, straw and women's hair, closing the water gates at the rusty bars under the bridges with patches of repair all over them, the wet stones glistening like sleepy crocodiles or dry ones, shaven water buffaloes longing in the sun. The poets only sang of the floods. A river. A river means Veki river which flows through Madurai city. Madurai. Madurai is a South Indian city situated in Tamil Nadu. It was a great center of Tamil culture and learning, especially in the Sangam period. City of temples and poets. There are many temples in Madurai, so it is known as the city of temples, and about lot of poets the city has given to the literature. Dries to a trickle in the sand. That means dries very much and what remains is a very small irregular stream flowing through the sand. Clogging is blocking and choking. Rusty bars. bars with rust, patches, repaired patches, glistening, shining, water buffaloes are animals from Asia like large black cows with horns carved backwards. They are often kept to pull plows or for their milk. So, now the explanation. In this stanza, the poet begins by setting the scene. He is going to be describing how the city of Madurai or the Madurai city is described by poets. He said it is a place that is made up of temples and poets, and these poets have always sung of the same things. Every summer in the city, the river Vaki, river is Vaki, basin is emptied. That means river becomes dry. The river dries to a trickle, means the sand is bared. The shapes and objects that are revealed are dark and somewhat ominous. There are sand drips and straw and women's hair. These things close up the water gates made of rusty bars with rust. Poet makes use of consonants in these lines with the repetition of G sound. Rhythm is also created through the reuse of the word scent in lines 6 and 7. Then, in general, the repetition of words beginning of S or words that carry the S sound, this is especially true for the first half of the stanza. Everything about the drainage system is old and it needs repair. The bridge is in patches, repaired, a fact that is revealed when the waters recede. In the last line of this stanza, poet uses two metaphors to compare the stones to animals. The wet one appears like crocodiles sleeping and the dry as lounging water buffaloes. These are the two metaphors. Despite all of this, the poets only sang of the floods. There is so much more to the city that the poets are ignoring. He was there for a day. When they had the floods, people everywhere talked of the inches rising, of the precise number of cobbled steps. Cobbled steps? Steps paved with stones, worn round and smooth with water. Run over by the water rising. Run over by the water rising means run over by the flooded water. On the bathing places, and the way it carried off 3 villages' houses, 1 pregnant woman, and couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda as usual. So, in this stanza of the poem, poet used the word he in the first line is the reference to the poet, perhaps the speaker himself or poet himself. This is an 11-line stanza. He states that he was only in the city for a day. It is in this stanza that a number of the more complicated and personal details are revealed. The details were not hidden, they were easily learned by the poet featured in this stanza. Everywhere the people spoke about the flood and the terrible things which resulted due to flood. It is not just a simple natural occurrence. It carried off 3 villagers' house, as well as a pregnant woman and a couple of cows. The cows have names making these lines lighter in tone than some of the others. The list like way in which this section of the poem is conveyed makes it clear that they are not uncommon occurrence. The people are used to them. Couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda. Gopi and Brinda are the name of cows, and he described a pregnant woman. And as usual is this happens every year when the river is flooded. The new poets still quoted the old poets, but no one spoke in verse. New poet still quoted the old poets means poets said things which were earlier said by the old poets. Yeah, already said by the old poets. But no one spoke in verse of the pregnant woman drowned with perhaps twins in her. Kicking at blank walls even before birth. Kicking at blank wall. Inside the pregnant woman's womb, the child seemed to be moving and kicking when she is about to drown. The problem that the poet has with is made clearer in the third stanza or in this stanza as he speaks of the similarities between old poets and new poets. Both spoke about the floods, yet ignored the tragedies which resulted due to flood. In fact, to make it worse, the new poets copied what the old ones did. There was no evolution in style or subject. In the fifth and sixth line of this stanza, the poet states that it is possible that the woman who died was going to give birth to twins, increasing the life lost. This is a very interesting contrast to the flooding of the river. In the first place, the waters are meant to fertilize the land and make it possible for the next crop to grow. Life is destroyed as it is being created. He said, the river has water enough to be poetic about only once a year, and then it carries away in the first half hour 3 village houses, a couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda, and one pregnant woman expecting identical twins with no moles on their bodies, with different colored diapers to tell them apart. Moreover, in this stanza seems like a concluding stanza or full of repetition of the incidents happened in the previous stanzas. Gopi and Brinda, the name of cows. These are the classical names associated with the sports of the Lord when he incarnated himself as Sri Krishna and played with the cowherds and cowherd lashes on the banks of the Yamuna. Very often, cattle are given such classical names. It is a practice observed throughout India, and Madurai also is no exception. Identical twins, twins who look exactly alike and therefore are difficult to be distinguished or acknowledged. No moles. No moles is usually a person is identified by some mark on his body, such as a mole. But these twins had no moles at all, and therefore their identification would have been almost impossible. Diapers are the baby napkins. Different colors of diapers to recognize the child. In this final stanza, the poet relays the words of the poet again. He said, that the poet complained of how the river has water enough to be poetic about only once a year. These are repetitions. It is only once a year that the poet pay attention to it, and even then they don't want to speak about the loss of property or life. They are only speaking of flood and the natural beauty and other good things. The speaker repeats a section of the second stanza again, restating what was lost. There are additional details added. A couple of cows named Gopi and Brinda and one pregnant woman. All these comes in the second stanza. Has already come in the second stanza. He repeats itself. There are additional details added. Now he says that the woman believed she was expecting identical twins. In the previous stanza, he is only telling that a pregnant woman. Now he is describing that woman believes expecting identical twins. They were going to be perfectly the same, with no way to tell them apart except through dressing them in colored diapers. This is another humorous line, but it has a darker undertone. It speaks to the lack of care with which the poets approach the land and the people. There are no desire to know who these people are or quest to adequately depict their sufferings. If we saw analytically if we analyze this poem, the poet talks about Madurai, a South Indian city known for its temples and great poets, and the river Veki, which runs through the city, which is almost dry. It is sand everywhere with all manners of rubbish clogging the water gates. Under the bridge, which is not kept in good repair, black wet rocks glisten in the sunlight looking like crocodiles, while the dry rocks appear like buffaloes. The old poets did not refer to these details in their poems. They employed their poesy only to sing the great floods. A visitor was at Madurai on the day, and the river was in floods. Everywhere he heard people talking about the river rising inch by inch till it overflowed the planks. 3 houses were washed away, and also a pregnant woman and 2 cows. The poets of the present generation imitate the ancient poets and describing the flood only, but they quietly omit all reference to the human tragedy involved in the death of pregnant woman who perhaps carried a pair of babies within her. The visitor concludes that this is a river which has sufficient water only once a year, and at that time all it does is to wash away 3 village houses, a couple of cows, and a pregnant woman. This is all in this video. Thank you very much.